Hey, Jace Tunnell here. Today we're talking about sargassum washing up. Yeah, we've had a lot of this stuff and people are wondering what is it and what's it doing and can we get rid of it? But it just so happens that we have an expert working at the Heart Research Institute, Dr. Gibeaut, that's going to tell us about the benefits and why we would want this on the beach. So let's get into it.
Yes, Jace, it looks like some sargassum has begun to wash in. It's going to be like this through August probably. Become more or less. It'll change with the waves and the currents. But this sargassum is floating out in the Gulf, and it's actually a habitat for animals, for marine life, various marine life. While it's out there, we actually consider it a floating habitat. But when it comes in on the beach, what most people think of it is as getting in the way of recreating on the beach. And so it also serves a purpose on the beach, though, when it lands here. A very important process of how the beach builds and how it recovers after storms. And you can see here all along the shoreline, we have a mix of ages of sargassum. It looks like it's been coming in off and on for a week or so. There's some of it's older, some of it's fresher. But right now it's out here, and when it really becomes important from a dune building point of view is when it gets lifted up and blown back toward the dunes. And there it acts as a collector for sand that's blowing along the dunes or up to the dunes and starts trapping that sand and holding it there for more plants to come in, and eventually you form what we call a coppice mound or a baby dune environment in front of the main dunes. And it all starts with some of the sargassum that's been rafted up toward the dunes. So we've walked up the beach all the way from the water line up here to the edge of the dunes, and we're right in front of the dunes. And we can see some parts that have sargassum on them. They're really decayed sargassum, but nonetheless, they're these parts that have been lifted up during higher water and deposited up here by the dunes, in front of the dunes. And you can see that the wind is predominantly coming from this direction and moving the sand, and the sargassum helps capture that sand and gets it dropped out of the wind flow here, and you start to see a small mound, a small deposit behind it, a shallow deposit behind this clump of decayed sargassum. And we'll go over here and we'll see this process has continued, and the dunes are getting a little bit bigger. In fact, we call them coppice mounds or baby dunes, or however you want to think of them. Okay, so we've walked downwind of where we were just now, looking at that very small pile of sand forming. But now we see these larger mounds downwind, and they have grown large enough, and vegetation has taken hold, and that's even more of a trapping mechanism and more building of the coppice mound zone on this beach. So you can see how we started out with just a small amount of sargassum, moved it down here, continued down here, and other vegetation, living vegetation takes over and starts trapping more and more sand. And eventually, depending on the storm frequency and human activity, of course, this whole zone could become more like the foredune, which is the first line of dunes that we see that is relatively continuous right there along the coppice mound zone that we're standing on now. And so when it's down here on the beach where people are walking across it to get to the shore, it really impacts the tourism. But as I was saying, it's a very important part of the beach, and to leave as much of it on the beach as practical is a good thing to do. And when it gets to be built up too much, we have had the practice of actually scraping the beach and moving the sargassum and pushing it up against the dunes, and in some cases where it's really heavy, actually backstacking it and moving it behind the dunes. That's a practice that really alters the shape of the beach and the sedimentation that goes on that makes the beach resilient to different wave environments, different tide conditions, and things like that. So when you take the sargassum and you start moving it around, then you have some impacts with respect to that.
Okay, so who would have known that this stuff is so important? I mean, I knew that it was really important to be able to, you know, as a habitat, and fish and shrimp and crabs and stuff living around it and stuff like that. But once it washes up, I was kind of thinking of, man, get it off the beach. But now after hearing how beneficial it is and building up sand dunes for actually human protection, I'm thinking we ought to be leaving this on the beach. All right, I guess that's it for this episode of Beachcombing. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.